Hi, my name is Robert Leland. I'm an orthopedic foot and ankle specialist. I practice in Colorado. Today I'm going to be going over a first MTP arthrodesis utilizing OSSIObio-integrating implants. I'm making a dorsal-medial approach, and since I'm going to put my screws outside of my incision, then I'm going to make that incision a little bit smaller than a broader incision. But if I was using my screws from within my incision, perhaps I'd make it a little bit longer. Okay, so for the joint preparation, I'm more of a denude the cartilage with a chisel rongeur person than a reamer. But however you like to do it, perfectly fine. Got our joint nicely denuded of all remnants of articular cartilage. I'm just preparing the joint for arthrodesis, fenestrating the joint surface with the drill bit. All right, so from a fixation standpoint, within the Ossio system, there are 4.0 millimeter headless compression screws, and there are compression staples. So when I'm placing the screws, I usually start a little bit plantar, and since I'm using for me, a little bit more minimalist incision, I'm putting my screws outside of my main incision. Where my K-wire is starting, I'm just making a little pocket hole. And same thing on the proximal phalanx. So I'm doing crossing screws. One from the metatarsal into the phalanx, one from the phalanx into the metatarsal. If you prefer 2 screws from the metatarsal into the phalanx, that's absolutely fine. If you prefer one more plantar medial, one dorsal medial, that's fine. It's whatever pattern you prefer. Now if I could have the K-wire, please. And if you prefer, you can certainly pin it first rather than using the screw K-wires as your fixation. So it's really, there's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever you prefer. All right, let's check our x-rays and see where we are. So on the AP view, I'm pretty happy with my K-wire position and my arthrodesis position. Now, one thing that you have to realize is the head on the 4.0 millimeter headless screws is a little bigger, and you do have to countersink. So if you're placing a screw from the proximal phalanx into the metatarsal, it's really important that you try to get it distal enough that you have enough bone that you're not going to break out the cortex near the arthrodesis site when the screw goes in. I think we're in a good position on our lateral. The pins are pretty well centered in the bone. So the next step with the screw system is to measure the screw length. And if we look at my screw going from the metatarsal into the proximal phalanx, if I look here, that's measuring about 50. I'm going to advance this first pin through the cortex just to try to keep it in place. Okay. All right, so the next step is drilling. And I like to put in one screw at a time, so I will drill, tap, screw on each K-wire rather than drilling on both K-wires. And that way I keep my fixation, keeping the arthrodesis site in a good position. with the other K-wire until I have a screw in. And if we look on our drill bits and taps are all calibrated so we can see how far it is in addition to just feeling. The next step is tapping. I tap on power. You may want to consider the first time you use the screws, tapping on hand and just getting a feel. So I'm going to start it on power and then finish it on hand so I get a little bit of a better feel. And it's nicely compressing the joint. Now, there is a little bit of a feel and a learning curve on putting these screws in as opposed to a metal screw, particularly a metal screw that's a headed screw where you're really going to butt up against the cortex. So as the headless component of the screw goes into the bone, it will give you a bite. And this is really, I'm old, I'm not as strong as I used to be, but this is giving me, it's getting quite a bit of resistance. So that's a pretty good screw purchase. The same sequence. It's on this second screw, drill. And then next we do tap again. And for putting it in against the bone, I do like having the feel of tightening on hand. And once again, this is compressing the joint. We can see it. And this is a really satisfying bite. Okay, let's take out those K-wires. So as far as visualizing where your screws are, well, if the screw head is prominent, you can see it depending on how good your intraoperative fluoroscopy is. You can usually see a prominent screw head. But intramedullary, you usually don't see the screw. So you're really relying on your K-wire placement to make sure that your screw's in the right spot. I like adding in a staple in addition to the two screws, but you can choose how you like to do it. So the Ossio staples are similar to other compression staples in their insertion, in their use. There are a couple differences. This is a 20 by 20 by 20 staple. If the proximal phalanx is only, let's say 18 at the insertion site or 16, I can easily cut the one end. So I can make this a custom size. And you can either use a pin cutter or a saw or probably even a rongeur to cut that. So if I'm putting a staple on top, I like to have a little trough cut out on the dorsal aspect of the metatarsal head. So make a little trough, just so my staple is sitting more flush with the bone. And particularly with a little bit of extension at the arthrodesis site, that makes it even more flush. There is an aiming guide system, so you can center it where you want first, put it exactly where you want it, or in certain bones, like today when I used it on a talonavicular arthrodesis to supplement a screw, recognizing that the navicular has less bone, I put my pin in my navicular first and confirmed that I liked my navicular pin, and then just slid the guide over for my talus pin. Now, for this, I can look right down at it. I don't think that's necessary. So, and can I have a stay pin, please? I'll just hold that in the right spot. All right. So I am going to cut that pin. Yeah, let's make it a couple millimeters shorter. Okay. So now we've got a custom pin size. Now we've got 20 by 16. Try that with a metal staple. And mallet, please. Okay, so we release the staple and then take the tamp. These tamps are great. And we've got that staple nice and flush now since I did create that trough. So I'm pretty happy with this fixation. This is my standard fixation with the OSSIOfiber first MTP arthrodesis. 2 crossing screws, 1 dorsal staple. So if we want to look at that on the x-ray, no metal to see, but we've got nice apposition and the screw heads. The one in the proximal phalanx is maybe butting out ever so slightly, but I'm okay with that. That's not going to cause a problem. And the one in the metatarsal head, going from the metatarsal head into the proximal phalanx, is nice and flush. Similarly on the side view, we see the arthrodesis, but no evidence of obviously any metal, and that staple is nice and flush on the x-ray, just like it is on the cadaver model. So if anyone has any questions or concerns about the stability of the fixation, granted this is time 1, this is not out, but I'm taking that fixation, I'm really stressing this pretty hard, and I'm trying to break it apart. I can't do that. So, I've never done this on a patient, obviously, but I cannot get this to budge. So if there's concerns about this versus standard metal fixation, it's plenty strong.